Labor members around the country are now receiving ballots in the mail to cast a vote for who they want as opposition leader, former union boss Bill Shorten or former Deputy Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Last night, Mr Albanese joined 7:30 to discuss his vision for the future of the ALP. We offered Bill Shorten the same opportunity and he joined me from Adelaide a short time ago. Bill Shorten, welcome to the program.
Good evening, Leigh.
I want to start by asking you the same thing that I started last night asking Anthony Albanese. Opposition leaders who come in first after an election loss are very rarely the people who then go on to be their party's next Prime Minister. They're often transitional leaders. Given that, why do you want the job now?
I believe Labor can win the next election. On no less than 6 other occasions in the last 50 years, Labor's secured bigger swings than that is required by Labor at the next election to win. But more importantly than just winning elections, I want to be the Labor leader because I want to help place Labor as relevant to the future of all Australians. That's the key question for the Labor Party. How do we ensure that our values and our party and our ideas are relevant to the future of all Australians in 2020, in 2030 and beyond?
Do you think you've had a problem with relevance?
I think we did some good things in our last 6 years, but I also think we made some mistakes. What I do know is that there are ideas up for grabs in the Australian public, in Australian politics, positive ideas, which if Labor builds upon, will certainly reconnect with the trust of the Australian people. Australians don't want their government sitting in their lounge rooms with them, but they do want to have a belief that the Labor Party has a view about the future and will help Australians navigate their path to the future in the next number of years and decades.
You said that you made some mistakes in your last term in government. Other than the internal Gillard-Rudd row, what do you consider the other mistakes to be?
Well, I think we got a lot of things right, from putting a price on carbon pollution, the disability insurance scheme, the handling of the GFC. But we did make mistakes. And you're right, whilst disunity was one issue that we need to rule a line under, the public disparagement of each other, I do believe that there were some policy mistakes we made. One was going too hard in terms of how we tried to encourage sole parents to work. Another issue I suspect was I believe, was the rollout of the pink bat scheme. But having said that, I'm not going to throw the economic baby out with the bathwater. Labor did some good things. One of the lessons after the 96 election defeat is that Labor was too quick to relinquish the accomplishments of the Hawke-Keating government. And if elected leader, I certainly won't be giving up everything that Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard did that was good.
How about asylum seeker policy? How do you feel about how the party's handled that in recent years?
Well, I think some of the immigration and asylum seeker debate has been blown off course really since the time of Pauline Hanson and then John Howard giving in to Pauline Hanson's extreme views. I believe Labor is a pro-immigration party. We should always welcome refugees to this country. We've also got to make sure, though, that in how we encourage immigration and how we carry out our humanitarian obligations to refugees, we need to make sure that we don't encourage the criminal syndicates in southern Indonesia to be able to lure people onto boats and then see mass drownings at sea. So we've got to balance all of that. But we are a pro-immigration party in Labor and we need to own the middle ground of Australian politics when it comes to talking about being pro-diversity and pro-immigration and pro-the humane treatment of refugees.
When you talk about, though, the need to balance those principles, I mean, how do you see that working in terms of a policy?
Well, caucus has to define the policy. One thing I've made clear if elected leader is that we'll be hearing less about I and more about we, the team. When it comes to immigration, you know, Australia's always been the land of the second chance. Ever since European settlement, people have been coming out here for political reasons or economic reasons or family reasons. We've always been good in this country at welcoming our immigrants. We always should be. So we need to make clear that we support a growing Australia. We want to make sure, though, that we grow in a way which doesn't overly stretch our crowded cities, our crowded infrastructure. We also recognise as part of our immigration approach that we welcome migrants who are skilled migrants. We welcome migrants who are coming here due to family reunion, and we also welcome migrants here who are refugees. What we can't afford to do, though, is have a system which creates incentive for people, desperate people, not criminals, not people who are illegal, but desperate people who understandably want to come to one of the finest countries in the world. We can't have a system where they're lured onto unsafe boats paying $10,000 at a time, then they potentially drown at sea.
Do you accept that as a candidate in this race for the leadership that you bring some baggage to the table in terms of the qualities of loyalty and trustworthiness because of your roles in the removal of first Kevin Rudd, then Julia Gillard?
Well, in terms of some of the very hard decisions which I and all of the caucus members have had to make in the previous government, yes, I do accept some responsibility. But at every point, I've been motivated by what I think is not only the best interest of Labor, but even more importantly than that, what's the best interests of the nation? I believed in the most recent leadership change that whilst Julia Gillard had done much in the minority parliament and many of the problems she was encountering were not of her own making, I recognised that Tony Abbott was odds on to electorally wipe out the Labor Party. I didn't want to see a leadership change, but I don't think it's in the interest of Australian democracy that you get a one-party state in Australia or just a Liberal control of everything. And I don't think that's healthy when one side of politics, be it Liberal or Labor, controls everything. So it was a very hard decision. And what I do recognise, and what the lesson I've learned from that, is that you can have political logic, and it may be very well-intentioned logic, but when you've got to recognise that people have an emotional reaction to things. So I understand why some people disapprove of the changes, even if it was done for the best of intents. That's why I think this ballot's a cleansing process, it's a healing process. Whoever wins, be it Anthony Albanese or myself, I think that the lesson for the Labor Party is we want all of our people involved. It's got to be a clear and transparent process, one that the Australian people can understand, and we all need to get behind the result, whoever wins.
Let me also finish with the same question I finished last night on with Anthony Albanese. Why should Labor members vote for you over him? Why are you more suited to the job at this particular time than Anthony Albanese is?
I think Anthony has some great and remarkable strengths. He's a very fierce and strong parliamentary performer. He certainly has been in Parliament for a long period of time, 17 plus years. They're his strengths. My strengths are different. I believe that the challenge for the Labor Party in the future is how do we make sure that we are best positioned to be relevant to the lives of Australians in the future, not just next week or next month, but the next decade and beyond. I believe that I can help make the Labor Party attractive to 1 million voters who are no longer voting for Labor across Australia. I also believe fundamentally that I'm a campaigner and a builder, and that Labor must always speak to its core brand, which is speaking up for the powerless and the disadvantaged. That's why during this campaign I've put domestic violence on the national political stage, because that's an issue where, more than any other I can think of, that people need, the victims, the disempowered need champions. So whilst I believe I can talk about Labor and convince people across Australia to look at us again, I also know that we've got to be true to our core values, which is speaking up for those in this country who not only seek success, but who are indeed disadvantaged and lack power.